Resident Evil is a big franchise. Games, comic books, shows, movies. Resident Evil continues to be big in the public conscious, especially in the year 2021 with the release of the 8th mainline entry in the series. It definitely was because of the quality of the game, right? Oh dear lord, what has humanity done? What the fuck is this? Hi there, my name is Potatoes953 and welcome to my honest review of Resident Evil 8 Village. But this isn't necessarily all we're doing. No, young lads. Today I'll also be talking about Resident Evil 4 and 7 very briefly. Resident Evil 8 is an interesting game, to say the least. It has a good story for the first time ever for Resident Evil. It's terrifying despite returning to a more action horror approach, and it's ridiculously fun for its shooting. What the hell is this game? I'll tell you what. It's what happens if Resident Evil 7 and 4 boned and it didn't create Call of Duty Zombies, but with dirty Southerners. I'll explain what I mean by this as we go along, but for now, just understand that I went into this game expecting to shit my pants and not have a fun time. First, we're going to talk about Resident Evil 4 very briefly. I loved this game, and it's mainly because of how fun and addicting the gameplay flow is. You walk into an area, shoot a bunch of baddies, pick up money from said baddies, solve a couple of very easy puzzles to get gems to sell to a merchant, upgrade your guns, and repeat. It's just a fun game to sit down and end up playing for hours. I don't know what it is about picking up a bunch of money and spending it on bigger and bigger guns that makes the game so fun, but it really works, and I never thought a game would ever be able to replicate it, but here we are, 16 years later, and they finally did it. I feel that with Resi 5 and 6, the developers didn't quite understand how the flow of Resi 4 makes it work as well as it does, and I'm very worried that the rumored remake that's supposedly in the works, they'll just screw it up somehow. But why did I talk about this? Well, it's simple. Resi 8 takes the gameplay loop from Resi 4 and turns it into a true survival horror game by simply adding what Resi 7 added to the series. Resi 7 is what made me a fan of horror games and Resident Evil. Who knew that you could simply make a relatable, playable character and stick him in a classic Resident Evil situation and then make it first person, and it would make one of the most horrifying experiences of all time. Resi 7 took what was great about the original 3 games and put it in a new perspective while making it feel like those original games. Ethan Winters is just an everyday dude, and acts the part, unlike the super cops and super soldiers the series has been plagued with. Where previous games we played as people who know how to shoot and never really feel any sense of fear, Ethan doesn't even know how to shoot properly, and is shoved into a situation where he only lives on adrenaline alone. Where other protagonists wouldn't even flinch at the horrors of the Baker estate, Ethan reacts like a person would. This is why I feel Resi 7 is genius, because it makes us, the players, feel connected to the situation because Ethan is more similar to us. Most of us aren't super cops, and most of us playing the game don't even know how to shoot a gun properly. In addition to that, the game is just straight up terrifying. No scare from any horror game ever comes close to the amount of blood that pumps whenever I go through the section where Jack chases you throughout the main house. Finally, we get to talk about the main point of this video. Resident Evil 8 is a direct sequel to 7 from the perspective of the same protagonist. Ethan now has a super cute baby named Rose, and like every video game dad, he needs to protect her. In this case, chasing her to an Eastern European village to find and kill her kidnapper, Mother Miranda. This village is seemingly empty until you find a random villager who immediately gets eaten by a werewolf. Ethan fends off an attack, and is directed towards the castle from a group of survivors who all manage to die. You make your way through 4 dungeons to defeat bosses, picking up puzzle pieces and keys that will lead you to the heart of the village where you can hopefully save that adorable baby from the start of the game. Ha! Joke's on you. You're going to now play as Chris Redfield first, because he needs to destroy the village because he loves blowing stuff up. Chris finds out that the village's people are being controlled by a mold, and that's where Spencer got his idea for the T and G viruses. Now, we kill Mother Miranda as Ethan. Ethan dies because we can never have anything good in life. Credits roll, And then you see the super cute baby now grown up into a teenager, and the game ends. I didn't actually spoil anything there in that description, by the way, other than the fact that Ethan dies, of course. And in that description I just wrote, it made me want to replay the game and also need a sequel at the same time. I loved the plot of this game. I thought that the story and mystery was intriguing, and I felt that it was a really cool sequel to the events in 7. I also really loved how the Umbrella plotline was brought back into the series. I thought that this game has the best story in the entire franchise. I wasn't just there for the scares by the end. I wasn't just there for the files like I was in 1, 3, and 4. I was there for the struggles Ethan has to face to get his daughter back. Frankly, I'm going to replay this game on Village of Shadows difficulty just for the achievement to say that I made Ethan the best dad ever. Now, onto the environments of this game. Dungeons, if you will. The second one you come across after the village, which I'll get to, stop typing, is the castle. This area feels very similar to the Spencer Mansion from the first game in its aesthetic and feel, in my opinion. But it's done a little worse. Here you fight the tall vampire lady the internet lost their shit over, and this is probably the second best area in the game. Wandering through this large space, while always feeling watched and or stalked by Lady Dimitrescu or her quote-unquote daughters, is really terrifying, especially since you still have weak weapons, and the best one you probably have is your shotgun, if you grabbed it in the first fight in the village. By the way, word of advice, don't use your shotgun in this section aside from the boss fights. Your pistol isn't going to do the job against the boss fights. It's still possible, it's just not going to be fun. After you take out Dimitrescu, you return to the village where you get a key to the estate where the doll maker lives. Everyone seems to adore this section, but I just feel like it was a missed opportunity. This area's gimmick is that you don't have any weapons and you're hallucinating thanks to hallucinogens. You see a fetus-like BOW that I still cannot tell if it is real or not, as you solve a PT-like escape room. You then go and kill the doll maker by playing hide-and-seek with her doll. I feel like this area was a missed opportunity. Imagine if instead of an escape room, you needed to make your way through some areas from Resident Evil 7. Maybe relive the boss fights from that game, especially the Jack Chainsaw fight and the Marguerite Spider fights. I think that would have been horrifying, and I think it really would have fit the story, because Ethan very clearly has PTSD to the events of the Baker estate, despite it never being really talked about. I feel that that's a missed opportunity in and of itself, but it's fine. After this, you return to the village where you make your way over to the swamp, which is the standard water monster area that most horror games have. And this is definitely the second weakest area of the game, since there's no real exploration to be had, and it's basically an on-rails section the entire time. The only real exploration to be had that isn't really on rails is an area where you go through some mines, and even that's very, very linear. You then head to the Stronghold, where you fight a horde of werewolves in a very boring action section without real exploration or anything. It's pretty much just a boss gauntlet. It's not very fun, and it's fun because of the gunplay, but that's the only real saving grace. It's pretty boring, and I don't think that this area should have been in the game. And finally, we enter the factory, where you make your way through mechanically modified monsters as you climb the factory to fight Heisenberg. This area is a little more open-ended than the others, as there are keys you need to get to unlock sections on previous floors as you make your way between them to find a key to the exit. After this, you enter a cobbled-together tank that Chris made for you in order to destroy the now mutated monster Heisenberg turned into. Finally, we enter the village, and this is my favorite part of the whole game. This is the most open-ended section of the entire game, and you return to it multiple times throughout the game with new puzzle pieces to unlock new areas of the village, and uncover the story of the people who once lived here. This is the closest any game in the series has ever gotten to the magic of the Spencer Mansion, which you constantly are returning to, uncovering new things with the new keys you've retrieved. I really like this section because of the atmosphere and the amount of places to explore and pick up new items. Overall, if the village wasn't there, I'd be singing a very, very different story about this game. Um, because, in my opinion, the various areas of the game are very weak without the village to link them all together and spread them out. One thing I wish that was in the game was the ability to return to the castle and dollhouse with new keys to unlock new items like you can in the village. With the castle being so big, it's so easy and it would make sense thematically for that area to add new doors that you can only access through keys you've collected in the village and or keys that are only available from the merchant, which will net you access to new areas filled with items or even weapons that you could easily miss on a first playthrough. And in the dollhouse, just simply add hidden doors and stuff. It just needs to add more doors and that you gain access to after completing that particular area's like boss fight and stuff. Maybe the basement was actually filled much larger and filled with ammo and healing items that you only gain access to by killing the BOW in the basement. I just feel like being unable to return to these areas with more items is a missed opportunity, and I really would have loved the ability to return to these areas with bigger guns. You may ask, how would it be dangerous? You just fill them to the brim with zombies and lichen. In 7, you can freely return to the main house and old house as much as you want until the mutated Jack fight, but they slowly get filled with more and more enemies throughout the game. Imagine that, but the entirety of the castle and dollhouse. I just feel like the middle part of the game is too short, with the Moreau Swamp section only taking about a half an hour if you're competent, and the dollhouse area being about the same time if you know what you're doing. The dollhouse section, if the dollhouse section were longer, or if you could explore older areas, I feel you could have removed the entire stronghold area, which is absolutely the weakest the game gets. I just feel like the stronghold is the worst part, and it didn't need to be there if they simply flushed out the middle areas some. Finally, we get to the Chris section and mutated Miranda fights. These are good. The Chris section doesn't really need to exist in my opinion other than to pad the runtime. Frankly, if they made the middle two sections longer, it really wouldn't need to exist. And frankly, when I shifted to Chris, I basically just wanted it to end so that we could get back to the cliffhanger they left Ethan on. I do like the fact that the section connects the mold storyline to the Umbrella storyline better than just Blue Umbrella cleaning up the mess that the mold made. I also liked it for clearing up the Mia thing. Either way, I just thought that the Chris section was just fine. It just feels a little out of place as an on-rails action section like Resident Evil 4 in a primarily survival horror game. Now, onto the mutated Miranda fight. As far as Resident Evil final bosses are concerned, it's pretty good. I liked the fact that it wasn't split into obvious phases and her attacks are pretty easy to avoid and defend against. My main complaint about it is that she's a bit too much of a bullet sponge. It takes a little while to beat her, but overall it's a pretty fun fight overall. Gameplay-wise, it feels like Resident Evil 4 while holding this survival horror spirit from Resident Evil 7. Enemies drop ammo, but only just enough to get by if you aren't conserving it on normal difficulty. My only big complaint with the enemies dropping items in this game is the fact that they'll drop items to craft healing items, which made healing items not an issue for me. It made me different on Hardcore and Village of Shadows difficulty, but when I played Hardcore, it was on New Game Plus, so it didn't really matter. My biggest complaint about the items in this game is that they're a little too easy to find. There's always a floating arrow above an item when you're able to take it or interact with it. I know this was a response to complaints with 7, but it made finding items in that game very fun for me. It made me search everywhere, every nook and cranny for them. And it made returning to previous sections to go look for ammo and healing items more fun because you had to go searching in everywhere to find it. And it was engaging. They could have made psychostimulants an item that you could have bought from the merchant, and I think that with the large open-ended sections, it would have made him more engaging. Um, Particularly places like the castle, because items are just in the weirdest places and they don't really make sense as to where they are. Like, I imagine where ammo could have, and like herbs and stuff could have like been hiding under the couches and stuff from previous survivors and stuff. But it's just like the way that they're just kind of hanging out places doesn't really make sense to me. Overall, I think Resident Evil 8 Village is one of the best Resident Evil games ever. Is it my favorite? Yes. For as much griping as I was doing throughout this video, I really liked this game. I played through it twice the first month the game was out, and a third time more recently, and with each replay, I liked it more and more. While getting footage for this video, I'm bound to get sucked in again. I just can't help but wind up getting sucked in by Ethan's quest to save Rose, and while doing so, discovering new secrets I missed in my last playthrough. Hell, I've even put a few hours into the mercenary mode just because it's fun. Overall, I think this game gets a 9 out of 10 from me. I would highly recommend this game alongside 4 and 7. This game may have issues that I've laid out, and there are a couple things I didn't state, like how I think Resident Evil 7 did a better job showing off the antagonists during that famous dinner scene, but I really, really loved this game. And I would recommend it with 4 and 7. 4 may seem outdated at times, and the controls take a bit of time to get used to, but in it you'll find one of the best games ever, and it's probably one of the funnest games I've ever played too. And with 7, it's just a terrifying horror game that I would highly recommend. Thank you for watching my video. Like the video if you liked it. Comment something. I don't care. And as always, have a fantastic day. Goodbye.